I never thought I'd find happiness in being fired, but life has a strange way of delivering justice when you least expect it. My name is Olivia Barrett. For 11 years, I was a senior contract specialist at Silverwood Solutions, a tech consulting firm headquartered in Denver's gleaming downtown district. My job involved scrutinizing the fine print that nobody else had the patience to read, crafting contractual safeguards that protected our company from potential disasters, and ensuring our agreements were airtight. I was good at what I did. No, I was exceptional at it. That Tuesday morning started like any other. Denver's crisp autumn air filled my lungs as I walked from the parking garage to our office building. I grabbed my usual Americano from the lobby cafe, exchanged pleasantries with security, and headed up to the 34th floor. My inbox was already filling up with the usual morning traffic when a message from HR appeared with a subject line that simply read, "Meeting request. Urgent." The body of the email was even more cryptic. "Please come to HR, bring your badge." 12 words that would change everything. I remember staring at those words, trying to process their meaning. In my 11 years at Silverwood, I'd never been summoned to HR like this. My performance reviews were consistently stellar. Just last month, I had finalized the biggest deal in company history, a $124 million contract with Astraline Corporation, a tech giant that we'd been courting for years. With a strange heaviness in my chest, I gathered my things and made my way to the HR department on the 36th floor. The elevator ride felt endless, each floor indicator lighting up with agonizing slowness. When I finally reached HR, Erica Holt, the HR director, greeted me with a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Olivia, thank you for coming so quickly. We'll be in conference room C. Greg is already waiting." Greg Malden, my department head and the thorn in my side for the past 3 years. Since his promotion to vice president of operations, Greg had made it clear that he saw me as competition rather than a valuable team member. Despite my seniority and expertise, he routinely excluded me from key meetings and took credit for my work. I'd learned to navigate around his insecurities, focusing on delivering results rather than playing office politics. The conference room was small, designed for uncomfortable conversations. Greg sat at the far end of the table, his expression unreadable. A manila folder lay closed in front of him. Erica gestured for me to sit and took the chair next to Greg. "Olivia," Erica began, her voice professionally detached. "I'm afraid we've called you here today because Silverwood is undergoing some organizational restructuring." The corporate euphemism hung in the air. I waited for more, but she seemed to expect me to fill the silence. "Restructuring," I repeated. "What exactly does that mean for my position?" Greg cleared his throat. "After careful evaluation, we've determined that your role is redundant within our new organizational structure." Redundant. The word landed like a slap. 11 years of dedication reduced to a corporate buzzword. "I see," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "And may I ask what prompted this evaluation, especially considering I just closed the Astraline deal last week?" Greg shifted uncomfortably. "This decision isn't a reflection on your performance, Olivia. It's purely structural. The company is moving in a new direction, and we're streamlining certain departments. My department has the highest ROI in the company," I pointed out, "and the Astraline contract is worth $124 million. How exactly is eliminating the person who secured that deal streamlining, Soap?" Erica interjected smoothly. "We understand this is difficult news, Olivia. We've prepared a severance package that includes 4 weeks of pay and continuation of benefits through the end of the month." 4 weeks, after 11 years. The insulting offer momentarily rendered me speechless. "We'll need your badge and company devices before you leave today," Erica continued, sliding a termination agreement across the table. "Of course, we'll need you to sign this as well." I didn't touch the document. "I'd like to review this with my attorney before signing anything." Greg's jaw tightened. "This is standard procedure, Olivia. Everyone who leaves signs the same agreement." "Nevertheless," I said, "I'll be reviewing it first. Is there anything else?" Erica looked uncomfortable, but shook her head. Security will escort you to your desk to collect your personal belongings. That won't be necessary, I said, rising from my chair. I know my way around after 11 years. I left the room with my head held high, though inside I was reeling. Redundant. The word echoed in my mind as I walked back to my desk, feeling the curious stares of colleagues who sensed something was wrong. I packed my few personal items into a cardboard box, a framed photo of my parents, a potted succulent that had somehow survived years of neglect, a few books, and the crystal paperweight the team had given me for my 10-year anniversary. Just last year, they'd celebrated my decade of service with cake and champagne. Greg had even made a speech about my invaluable contributions to the company. Now, I was redundant. I took one last look at my desk, then walked toward the elevator, past the cubicles of colleagues who averted their eyes, past the conference room where I'd spent countless hours negotiating the Astroline deal, past the break room where I'd shared morning coffee with my team for over a decade. No one stopped me. No one said goodbye. In corporate America, the departed become ghosts instantly best forgotten, lest anyone be reminded of their own vulnerability. The security guard in the lobby, Mike, looked surprised to see me leaving so early. Box in hand. "Everything okay, Ms. Barrett?" he asked. "Just great, Mike," I replied with a brittle smile. "I've been made redundant." His face fell. "I'm sorry to hear that. You've always been one of the good ones." I nodded, unable to trust my voice, and pushed through the revolving door into the autumn sunshine. The light seemed too bright, too cheerful for such a dark moment. I walked to my car, placed the box carefully in the trunk, and sat in the driver's seat, staring at the steering wheel. I didn't cry. Not yet. Instead, I felt a strange, hollow sensation in my chest, as if something vital had been scooped out. 11 years of my life, dedicated to a company that could discard me with 12 words in an email. The drive home was a blur. My condo, usually a welcome sanctuary after a long day, felt alien and too quiet. I set my box of belongings on the kitchen counter and poured myself a generous glass of Cabernet. The clock on the wall read 11:37 a.m., too early for wine under normal circumstances. But being fired before lunch seemed like a reasonable exception. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. "How's work today? Honey, Dad and I are thinking of visiting next month." I couldn't bring myself to respond yet. How could I tell them that the career they'd been so proud of was suddenly over? That their daughter, the first in the family to graduate college, the one who'd made it in the corporate world, was now unemployed. I took a long sip of wine and tried to think logically. I had savings enough to last several months if I was careful. My reputation in the industry was excellent. Finding another position shouldn't be impossible. But the humiliation of being discarded so callously after bringing in the biggest contract in company history burned like acid. My phone rang again. This time it was Jenna, my closest friend at Silverwood and a manager in the finance department. "Olivia, what the hell happened?" she demanded when I answered. "There are rumors flying everywhere. Security said you left with a box." "I've been made redundant," I said, the words tasting bitter. "Apparently, my position is no longer necessary in the new organizational structure." "That's bullshit," Jenna said flatly. "This is Greg, isn't it? He's been trying to push you out for years." He and Erica delivered the news together. 4 weeks severance for 11 years of service. 4 weeks. Jenna's outrage was palpable. "That's insulting, and right after the Astroline deal. Olivia, this doesn't make any sense." "Tell me about it," I sighed, taking another sip of wine. "I didn't sign their termination agreement. Something feels off about all of this." "Good. Don't sign anything until you've had a lawyer review it." Jenna paused. "What are you going to do now?" "Finish this wine. Maybe order takeout. Start updating my resume tomorrow." "I'm coming over after work," she declared. "With more wine and Thai food, we'll figure this out together." After hanging up, I wandered through my condo, feeling strangely disconnected from my surroundings. The view of the Denver skyline from my living room window now included the Silverwood building, a sleek glass tower that had been a source of pride, but now felt like a monument to betrayal. On impulse, I went to my home office and opened the filing cabinet where I kept important documents. Over the years, I'd developed a habit of bringing home copies of significant contracts and agreements, not company secrets. Just my own work that I used as templates or references. As a contract specialist, I believed in being thorough, in protecting myself as well as my employer. I pulled out a folder labeled Employment and began reviewing my original hiring documents and subsequent amendments. Nothing jumped out immediately, but then I noticed a thin folder marked 2018 Amendments. 2018 had been a difficult year for Silverwood. After losing several major clients, the company had been forced to implement cost-cutting measures, including a round of layoffs. To prevent an exodus of remaining talent, management had offered enhanced benefits and protections. I opened the folder and began reading through the documents. Most were standard amendments to the employee handbook and benefits package, but one document caught my attention: Addendum to Employee Severance and Protection Agreement. As I read through the legal language, my pulse quickened. There, in Section 7, Paragraph C, was a provision I'd completely forgotten about. In recognition of employee loyalty during company restructuring, any employee with 5 or more years of continuous service who is terminated without documented performance issues within 30 days prior to quarterly financial reporting shall be entitled to receive 10% of the company's quarterly profit as additional severance compensation. I read the paragraph 3 times to make sure I wasn't misunderstanding. This had been the company's way of preventing managers from firing long-term employees right before bonuses or profit-sharing distributions, a practice some had used to redistribute the bonus pool among favorites. I quickly checked the dates. I'd been fired on Tuesday, October 12th. The quarterly financial reporting was scheduled for November 5th, well within the 30-day window specified in the agreement. But what were the current quarterly profits expected to be? The Astroline deal was worth $124 million total, but that would be spread across multiple quarters. Still, this quarter would show a significant profit bump from the initial payment. I reached for my phone and called Jenna back. "Hey, I know you're still at work, but I need to ask you something," I said when she answered. "Do you have access to the projected quarterly financials?" "I can see them, yes," she said cautiously. "Why?" "I found something in my employment contract. I need to know what the projected profit is for this quarter." "Hold on," Jenna said. I could hear her typing. "I shouldn't be telling you this, but after what they did to you, the projected net profit for Q4 is approximately $124 million, largely due to the Astroline deal you closed." My heart skipped a beat. "Are you sure about that number?" "Positive. The executive summary projects $124.3 million in profit, with the note primarily attributed to the successful acquisition of the Astroline contract. 10% of $124 million was $12.4 million. If that addendum was still valid, Silverwood had just made a very expensive mistake. "Jenna, I need you to do me one more favor," I said, my mind racing. "Can you find out if there were any documented performance issues in my file before today?" "I can try," she promised. "But Olivia, what's going on?" "I'll explain everything when you get here. And Jenna, be careful. Don't let anyone know what you're looking for." After hanging up, I sat back in my chair, the forgotten wine glass in my hand. If I was right, if that addendum was still in effect, Greg's decision to fire me might cost Silverwood $12.4 million. No wonder they'd been so eager to have me sign that termination agreement. I needed a lawyer. And not just any lawyer. I needed someone who specialized in employment contracts and wouldn't be intimidated by a company like Silverwood. I opened my laptop and began searching for employment attorneys in Denver. One name kept appearing in reviews and articles: Peter Glade of Glade & Associates, described as relentless, and the lawyer corporations fear most. His firm specialized in wrongful termination and contract disputes. I called his office, half expecting to get a receptionist and schedule an appointment for next week. Instead, Peter Glade himself answered on the third ring. Glade and Associates, this is Peter. Mr. Glade, my name is Olivia Barrett. I was terminated from my position at Silverwood Solutions this morning, and I've discovered what might be a significant contractual issue. I'd like to consult with you as soon as possible. Silverwood Solutions, he repeated, and I could hear the interest in his voice. I'm familiar with them. What position did you hold there, Ms. Barrett? Senior Contract Specialist. I was with the company for 11 years. And they terminated you today. What reason did they give? They said my position was redundant due to restructuring. I see. There was a pause. I have an opening tomorrow at 9 a.m. Would that work for you? That would be perfect. Thank you. Bring all relevant documentation, your employment contract, any amendments, the termination notice, and anything else you think might be pertinent. After hanging up, I felt a surge of energy replace the numbness that had enveloped me since the morning. I spent the next few hours organizing my documents, making copies, and preparing notes for my meeting with Peter Glade. When Jenna arrived that evening, laden with Thai food and 2 bottles of wine, I was ready to share my discovery. Okay, spill it, she demanded, setting the food on my kitchen counter. What did you find that has you so worked up? I showed her the addendum and explained my calculation. Her eyes widened as she grasped the implications. $12.4 million. Are you serious? She shook her head in disbelief. No wonder Greg looked so smug in the executive meeting this afternoon. You were in an executive meeting. What did they say? Jenna hesitated. I probably shouldn't tell you this, but I overheard Greg talking to Max Whitfield before the meeting started. They were discussing your termination. Max Whitfield was Silverwood's CFO, a numbers man with a reputation for ruthless cost-cutting. What did they say? I pressed. Greg said something like, with Barrett gone, we can redistribute her bonus allocation. And Max laughed and said, that's why you make the big bucks, Greg. It was disgusting. My hands clenched into fists. So it wasn't about restructuring at all. They fired me to increase their own bonuses. That's what it sounds like, Jenna confirmed. But Olivia, if this addendum is still valid, they made a massive miscalculation. If it's still valid, I emphasized, that's what I need to confirm with the lawyer tomorrow. This amendment is from 2018. There could have been subsequent changes that nullified it. I looked into your personnel file, Jenna said, lowering her voice even though we were alone in my condo. There's nothing in there about performance issues. Your last review was 6 months ago, and you received the highest possible ratings across the board. That's good news, I said. But I wouldn't put it past Greg to try retroactively adding negative reviews. He'd need to get past me to do that, Jenna said firmly. I'm keeping an eye on your file. Be careful, Jenna. I don't want you risking your job for me. She waved away my concern. Please. After what I've seen today, I'm updating my resume anyway. Besides, I've always wanted to be part of a corporate espionage thriller. We spent the rest of the evening strategizing and catching up. Despite the circumstances, it felt good to laugh with Jenna, to feel like I wasn't alone in this fight. By the time she left, I had a clear plan for my meeting with Peter Glade and a renewed sense of purpose. Sleep didn't come easily that night. I tossed and turned, replaying the morning's events in my mind, imagining various scenarios for how my meeting with the lawyer would go. When my alarm went off at 7 a.m., I'd barely slept 4 hours, but adrenaline propelled me out of bed. I dressed carefully for my appointment, choosing a navy blue suit that projected confidence and professionalism. My corporate armor, I'd always called it. Today, I was going into battle. Peter Glade's office was located in a historic building in downtown Denver, just a few blocks from the Silverwood Tower. The irony wasn't lost on me as I walked past my former workplace to reach my appointment. The law office was smaller than I'd expected, but tastefully appointed. Peter Glade himself was a surprise, a man in his early 60s with a runner's build, sharp blue eyes, and a disarming smile. He rose from behind his desk when his assistant showed me in. Ms. Barrett, thank you for being punctual. Please, have a seat. He gestured to a comfortable chair across from his desk. Now, Tell me everything, starting from the beginning. For the next 20 minutes, I outlined my history with Silverwood, my relationship with Greg, the Astroline deal, and finally, my termination. Peter listened without interruption, occasionally making notes on a yellow legal pad. When I finished, I handed him the folder containing my employment documents, including the 2018 addendum. He read through them methodically, his expression giving nothing away. "This is interesting," he said finally, tapping the addendum with his pen. "This provision is unusually generous. Do you know what prompted it?" 2018 was a difficult year for the company. I explained. After a round of layoffs, morale was at an all-time low. The executive team implemented several retention measures to prevent further talent loss. This was one of them. "And to your knowledge, has this provision ever been invoked?" I shook my head. "Not that I'm aware of. The company's financial situation improved significantly after 2018, and there haven't been many terminations of long-term employees since then." Peter nodded thoughtfully. "Well, Ms. Barrett, based on what you've shown me and told me, you may have a very strong case. The language in this addendum is clear, and if it hasn't been superseded by subsequent agreements, Silverwood could be liable for the amount you calculated." "So what's our next step?" I asked. "First, I need to verify that this addendum is still in effect and hasn't been modified by later agreements. Then, I'll draft a letter to Silverwood outlining our position and demanding the compensation you're entitled to under this provision." "How long will that take?" "I can have the letter ready by tomorrow. But before we proceed, I want to make sure you understand what you're getting into." He leaned forward, his expression serious. "Silverwood is a large company with significant resources. They'll fight this. And they might fight dirty. Are you prepared for that?" I thought about Greg's smug face, about the casual cruelty of being dismissed as redundant after 11 years of dedicated service, about the conversation Jenna had overheard regarding my bonus allocation. "Yes, Mr. Glade, I'm prepared." "Good. Then let's get to work. And please, call me Peter." I left the law office feeling more hopeful than I had since receiving that fateful email. Peter had been confident and reassuring. And for the first time, I allowed myself to imagine a scenario where this nightmare ended with justice being served. That afternoon, I received a text from Jenna. "Need to talk. Can you meet at Riverside Park at 5? The request for a park meeting rather than coming to my condo was unusual. And it set off alarm bells. I replied quickly, "Everything okay?" Her response was immediate. "Yes, just being cautious. Better to talk outside." I arrived at Riverside Park at 4:50. Finding a bench with a view of the South Platte River. The park was relatively quiet on a weekday afternoon, with just a few joggers and dog walkers passing by. Jenna arrived right at 5, looking over her shoulder as she approached. "Thanks for meeting me here," she said, sitting beside me. "I didn't want to risk anyone overhearing us at your place or a cafe." "What's going on, Jenna? You're making me nervous." She pulled out her phone and opened a voice recording app. "I recorded something today that you need to hear." She pressed play, and I heard Greg Malden's voice, slightly tinny through the phone's speaker. Had to be done. "Max, Barrett was becoming a problem. Too many questions about bonus allocations, too much influence with the team." Another voice, Max Whitfield, I presumed responded, "I get it, but the timing is risky. The Astroline deal just closed." "Which is precisely why it had to be now." Greg insisted. "With the deal closed, we don't need her anymore. And this way, her bonus can be redistributed to the rest of the leadership team. A win-win." "Did she sign the termination agreement?" "Not yet, but she will. What choice does she have?" The recording ended, and Jenna looked at me expectantly. "Well, is that enough proof that your termination had nothing to do with restructuring?" "It's definitely damning." I agreed. "How did you manage to record this?" They were talking in the break room, and I was in the supply closet next door. The walls are thin. Jenna looked pleased with herself. "I've been keeping my phone recording whenever I'm around either of them today." "Is that legal?" I asked, concerned. "Colorado is a one-party consent state for recordings. she replied. I checked before I started my amateur spy career. Jenna, this is incredibly helpful, but also risky for you. If they find out, they won't, she interrupted. But that's not all. HR sent out an email today announcing your departure. It said you were leaving to pursue other opportunities, the usual corporate euphemism. But then something strange happened. About an hour after that email, Erica from HR was frantically calling managers to schedule performance reviews for anyone who's been with the company more than 5 years. They're covering their bases. I realized they must have figured out the same contract provision I found. Exactly. And there's more. I overheard Erica on the phone with someone in legal saying they needed to document performance issues for your file, backdated to before your termination. My blood boiled at the thought of them fabricating negative reviews to justify my firing. That's fraud. It sure is. And I have that conversation recorded too. Jenna handed me her phone. I've already sent copies of these recordings to my personal email and stored them in a secure cloud account. You should do the same. I forwarded the audio files to myself and to Peter Glade's email address. My lawyer is going to love these. Thank you, Jenna. Seriously. Don't thank me yet. There's one more thing you should know. She hesitated. The quarterly financial report is being finalized tomorrow, weeks ahead of schedule. They're rushing it through approval. They're trying to get around the 30-day window in the addendum, I guessed. Jenna nodded. Exactly. If they can officially close the quarter before the 30-day period is up, they might argue that the provision doesn't apply. Can they do that? Just change their financial reporting schedule. Not without board approval, which would require documenting the reason for the change, and that would create its own paper trail of suspicious activity. Jenna smiled wickedly. Besides, I may have accidentally misplaced some essential reconciliation files that are needed before the books can be closed. I stared at her in amazement. Jenna Fletcher, you are a dangerous woman. Only when my friends are threatened, she replied, her expression turning serious. What they did to you was wrong, Olivia, not just unfair, but potentially illegal. They deserve whatever's coming to them. Let's hope my lawyer agrees, I said. I'm meeting with him again tomorrow to review his demand letter before it's sent to Silverwood. Keep me posted, Jenna said, standing up. I should get going. Don't want to be seen with the enemy for too long. I watched her walk away, feeling a mixture of gratitude and concern. Jenna was putting herself at considerable risk to help me, and while her insider information was invaluable, I worried about the potential consequences for her career. When I returned home, I found an email from Peter Glade waiting in my inbox. Ms. Barrett, I've completed my review of your employment documents. The 2018 addendum is indeed still in effect and was never superseded by subsequent agreements. Your case is even stronger than I initially thought. Please call my office to schedule a meeting tomorrow afternoon to discuss our next steps. I called immediately and scheduled a meeting for 2 p.m. the following day. That night, I slept soundly for the first time since my termination. The next morning, I woke to an email notification from Silverwood's HR department. The subject line read, Updated Termination Documentation. With growing anger, I opened the email to find a performance review dated September 30th, 2 weeks before my termination, citing communication issues, failure to meet deadlines, and difficulty collaborating with team members. The review was purportedly signed by Greg Malden and acknowledged by me, though I'd never seen it before. I forwarded the email to Peter with a brief note. They're creating fake documentation. I never saw this review, and certainly never signed it. His response came within minutes. Save everything. Bring to our meeting. This strengthens our case. Later that day, as I prepared to leave for my appointment with Peter, another email arrived from Silverwood, this one from Erica Holt in HR. Dear Olivia, we noticed you haven't yet returned the signed termination agreement. As a reminder, your severance payment cannot be processed until we receive this document. For your convenience, I've attached it again. Please sign and return as soon as possible. I didn't bother responding. Instead, I gathered my evidence and headed to Peter's office. more determined than ever to fight back against Silverwood's deception. Peter was reviewing the falsified performance review when I arrived. He looked up with a grim smile. "They're getting desperate," he observed. "This is good for us." "How so?" I asked, taking a seat. "Creating fraudulent documents shows consciousness of guilt. They know they've violated the terms of your employment agreement, and they're scrambling to cover their tracks." He tapped the fake review. "The metadata on this document shows it was created yesterday, despite being dated September 30th. That's the kind of evidence judges love." "So what's our next step?" Peter pulled out a thick document from his desk drawer. "This is our demand letter. It outlines the facts of your termination, cites the relevant provision from the 2018 addendum, and demands payment of $12.4 million, representing 10% of the quarterly profit as stipulated in your employment agreement." I stared at the figure on the page. $12,400,000. The number seemed surreal. "We're also including a demand for penalties and attorney's fees." Peter continued. "And we're giving them 48 hours to respond before we file a formal lawsuit." "Do you think they'll pay?" I asked. "Not immediately," he admitted. "They'll likely try to negotiate down or find a legal loophole. But with the evidence we've gathered, particularly these fraudulent documents and the recordings from your friend, they're in a very weak position." "What about Jenna? I'm worried about retaliation against her." "We can include protections for her in any settlement agreement," Peter assured me, "but she should be careful in the meantime." I nodded, thinking about how much Jenna had risked to help me. "When will you send the letter?" "My assistant is finalizing it now. It will be delivered to Silverwood's legal department and to the CEO by courier this afternoon." He leaned back in his chair. "And then we wait." I didn't have to wait long. That evening, as I was preparing dinner, my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. "Olivia Barrett speaking." "Mrs. Barrett, this is Laura Jenkins, CEO of Silverwood Solutions." I nearly dropped the phone in surprise. Laura Jenkins rarely dealt directly with employees below the executive level. In my 11 years at Silverwood, I'd spoken with her perhaps 3 times. "Ms. Jenkins," I replied, keeping my voice neutral. "How can I help you?" "I've just received a rather disturbing letter from a law firm claiming to represent you," she said, her tone carefully modulated. "I was hoping we could discuss this matter directly, without involving attorneys." "I'm afraid that's not possible," I said. "Given the circumstances of my termination and the subsequent actions of your HR department, all communication should go through my legal counsel." There was a pause. "Olivia, I understand you're upset. Being let go is never easy, especially after so many years with the company. But surely we can resolve this without resorting to legal threats." "With all due respect, Mrs. Jenkins, my termination wasn't just being let go. I was fired without cause, immediately after bringing in the largest contract in company history, and then subjected to defamation when HR created falsified performance reviews to justify the termination after the fact." Another pause, longer this time. "These are serious allegations, Ms. Barrett." "Yes, they are, and they're all documented and included in my lawyer's letter." "I see." Her voice had cooled considerably. "Then I suppose we'll be communicating through our respective attorneys. Good evening, Ms. Barrett." She hung up before I could respond. I immediately called Peter to report the conversation. "That's actually a good sign," he said when I'd finished. "If the CEO is calling you directly, they're taking this seriously. The fact that she tried to resolve it without lawyers suggests they know they're vulnerable." "So what happens now?" "Now we wait for their formal response. It will likely come from their legal department rather than the CEO. In the meantime, don't have any further direct contact with anyone from Silverwood." The next day passed without any communication from Silverwood. I spent the time updating my resume and browsing job listings, though my heart wasn't in it. Part of me hoped that this legal battle would provide enough financial security that I wouldn't need to rush into a new position. On Friday afternoon, Peter called me. "We've received a response from Silverwood's legal counsel," he said, a note of satisfaction in his voice. "They're requesting a meeting on Monday to discuss a resolution to this unfortunate misunderstanding." That sounds promising, I said cautiously. It is. They wouldn't be meeting with us if they didn't recognize the strength of our position. I've agreed to the meeting, but insisted that you be present as well. Of course, what time? 10 a.m. at their offices. And Olivia, wear something professional but comfortable. These meetings can sometimes run long. Monday morning found me standing in front of Silverwood Tower once again, this time with Peter Glade at my side. The security guard, Mike, recognized me and looked confused. Min Barrett, I thought you... I have a meeting upstairs. Mike, I said with a smile. This is my attorney, Peter Glade. Mike's eyebrows rose, but he processed our visitor badges without comment. As we rode the elevator to the 40th floor, where the executive offices were located, I felt a strange mix of emotions, anxiety, anticipation, and a certain grim satisfaction at returning to the building not as a discarded employee, but as an adversary they had to reckon with. We were escorted to a large conference room with a spectacular view of the Rocky Mountains. Already seated at the table were Laura Jenkins, Erica Holt, and a stern-looking woman I didn't recognize, presumably Silverwood's legal counsel. Notably absent was Greg Malden. Laura stood to greet us. Ms. Barrett, Mr. Glade, thank you for coming. This is Vanessa Cortez, Silverwood's general counsel. We exchanged handshakes and took our seats. Peter placed his briefcase on the table and removed several folders, arranging them neatly in front of him. Before we begin, Laura said, I want to express my personal regret for how this situation has developed. It was never our intention. With all due respect, Ms. Jenkins. Peter interrupted. We're not here for apologies. We're here to discuss my client's rightful compensation under the terms of her employment agreement. Vanessa Cortez cleared her throat. Yes, about that agreement. We've reviewed the 2018 addendum you cited, and while we acknowledge its existence, we believe there are several factors that make it inapplicable in Ms. Barrett's case. Such as, Peter asked mildly, for one, the provision was intended to protect employees during the financial difficulties the company faced in 2018. The current financial landscape is entirely different. The intent behind the provision is irrelevant, Peter countered. The language is clear and unambiguous, and it was never rescinded or modified in subsequent agreements. Furthermore, Cortez continued as if he hadn't spoken. We have documentation indicating that Ms. Barrett was terminated for performance reasons, not as part of a restructuring that would exempt her from the provision's protection. I felt my face flush with anger at the blatant lie, but Peter placed a calming hand on my arm. Ah yes, the mysterious performance review dated September 30th, but created on October 13th, the day after Ms. Barrett's termination. Peter slid a document across the table. Here's the metadata analysis proving the document's actual creation date. Would you like to explain why HR was fabricating backdated performance reviews? Erica Holt shifted uncomfortably in her seat. Laura Jenkins turned to her with a questioning look. Is this true, Erica? Before Erica could respond, Peter continued. We also have recorded evidence that Ms. Barrett's termination was motivated by a desire to redistribute her bonus allocation, not by any legitimate business necessity or performance concerns. He played the recording Jenna had made of Greg and Max's conversation in the break room. As the damning words filled the conference room, Laura Jenkins's expression darkened. When the recording ended, she turned to Vanessa Cortez. Were you aware of this? Cortez's professional composure slipped momentarily. No, I was not. Laura pinched the bridge of her nose, clearly frustrated. Where is Greg? He should be here for this discussion. Mr. Malden had a conflict this morning, Erica said weakly. He asked me to represent the department's position. How convenient, Peter remarked. Well, in Mr. Malden's absence, perhaps we can discuss our demands directly. Ms. Barrett is entitled to 10% of the quarterly profit under the terms of the 2018 addendum. Based on the projected figures for this quarter, that amounts to $12.4 million. That's an outrageous sum, Cortez protested. Is it? Peter countered. It's exactly what the agreement specifies. And given the evidence of bad faith termination and subsequent document falsification, we'd be well within our rights to demand additional damages. But my client is willing to settle for what she's contractually entitled to. Laura Jenkins had been silent, her expression unreadable. Now she looked directly at me. Ms. Barrett, may I ask you a question? Of course, I replied cautiously. Did you know about this provision when you were terminated? I considered the question carefully. No, I didn't remember it until I reviewed my employment documents that evening. I see. She turned to Erica. And did HR or legal review Ms. Barrett's employment terms before proceeding with the termination? Erica looked uncomfortable. We followed standard procedures for workforce reduction. That's not what I asked, Laura said sharply. Did anyone review the specific terms of Ms. Barrett's employment agreement? I believe Greg assured us that everything was in order, Erica admitted. Laura's jaw tightened. She turned to Vanessa Cortez. Can we have the room for a moment? Peter and I were escorted to a smaller conference room, where we waited for nearly 30 minutes. I paced nervously while Peter reviewed his notes, seemingly unconcerned by the delay. What do you think is happening? I asked. They're reassessing their position. Peter replied calmly. The CEO just learned that her VP of Operations fired a valuable employee without proper review, potentially exposing the company to a $12.4 million liability, and then tried to cover it up with fraudulent documentation. I imagine there's a rather heated discussion taking place. When we were finally called back to the main conference room, only Laura Jenkins and Vanessa Cortez remained. Where's Erica? I asked. Ms. Holt has been excused to gather some additional information, Laura said diplomatically. Mr. Glade, Ms. Barrett, after consulting with our legal department, Silverwood is prepared to offer a settlement. Peter nodded encouragingly. We're listening. We are willing to pay Ms. Barrett the full amount specified in the 2018 addendum, $12.4 million, on the condition that she signs a non-disclosure agreement regarding the circumstances of her termination and subsequent reinstatement. Reinstatement, I echoed in surprise. Yes, Laura confirmed. We would like to offer you your position back, with an appropriate promotion and salary adjustment to reflect your contributions to the company, particularly the Astroline deal. I was speechless. This was the last thing I'd expected. Peter leaned forward. That's an interesting proposal, but I'm afraid it's not acceptable. My client has no interest in returning to a company that treated her so poorly. Laura nodded as if she'd anticipated this response. In that case, we are prepared to offer the $12.4 million as severance, along with an additional $200,000 in consideration for the non-disclosure agreement. We would also provide a positive reference and retract any negative documentation from Ms. Barrett's personnel file. I looked at Peter, who gave me a slight nod of approval. There's one more condition, I said, finding my voice. Jenna Fletcher is to be protected from any retaliation for her assistance in this matter. Laura raised an eyebrow. Ms. Fletcher from Finance. How was she involved? I hesitated, not wanting to implicate Jenna further, but Peter stepped in smoothly. Let's just say that Ms. Fletcher was aware of certain improprieties and brought them to Ms. Barrett's attention. Any settlement must include explicit protection for her continued employment and advancement opportunities. Laura and Vanessa exchanged glances. That can be arranged, Laura agreed after a moment. Though I would appreciate knowing the full extent of Ms. Fletcher's involvement. That won't be necessary, Peter said firmly. All that matters is that she receives the same protections under the non-disclosure and non-retaliation provisions as Ms. Barrett. Very well, Laura conceded. Vanessa will draft the settlement agreement today, and we can aim to finalize it by the end of the week. Is that acceptable? Peter looked at me questioningly. I nodded. That's acceptable, he confirmed. We'll expect the draft agreement by close of business tomorrow. As we prepared to leave, Laura addressed me directly. Ms. Barrett, for what it's worth, I want to personally apologize for how you were treated. It was not representative of Silverwood's values or my expectations as CEO. I met her gaze steadily. Thank you, Ms. Jenkins. But if I may offer some advice, you might want to look more closely at how Greg Malden manages his department. I'm not the first valuable employee he's pushed out, and I doubt I'll be the last. Her expression hardened. Rest assured, Mr. Malden's management practices are being thoroughly reviewed as we speak. As Peter and I left the building, I felt a weight lifting from my shoulders. The outcome was better than I could have hoped for, not just financial compensation, but vindication and the knowledge that Greg would face consequences for his actions. What happens now? I asked Peter as we walked back to his office. Now we wait for their draft agreement, review it carefully, and make any necessary changes. But barring any surprises, you should have a check for $12.6 million within the next 2 weeks. And your fee? I asked, suddenly realizing we'd never discussed his compensation. He smiled. Standard contingency for these cases, 1/3 of the settlement, which still leaves you with a very comfortable $8.4 million. The next few days passed in a blur of legal consultations and document reviews. True to her word, Laura Jenkins had Vanessa Cortez deliver a draft settlement agreement by the following afternoon. Peter and his team spent 2 days reviewing every clause and condition, making adjustments and clarifications where necessary. Jenna reported that Greg had been conspicuously absent from the office since our meeting, and rumors were circulating that he'd been placed on administrative leave pending an internal investigation. Max Whitfield, the CFO who'd been complicit in my termination, was also reportedly under scrutiny. By Friday, the settlement agreement was finalized to everyone's satisfaction. I signed the documents in Peter's office, still somewhat in disbelief that a wrongful termination was about to make me a multimillionaire. How does it feel? Peter asked as I set down the pen after the final signature. Surreal, I admitted. Part of me still can't believe this is happening. Believe it, he said, gathering the signed documents. Silverwood made a costly mistake, and now they're paying for it, literally. The wire transfer should be completed by Wednesday at the latest. Thank you, Peter, for everything. He waved away my gratitude. Just doing my job. And I have to say, this was one of the more satisfying cases I've handled recently. Corporate accountability is too rare these days. The following Wednesday, I received notification that $12.6 million had been deposited into my account. I stared at the balance on my computer screen, trying to comprehend that the number was real. That evening, Jenna came over to celebrate. She brought champagne, the expensive kind, and we toasted to unexpected windfalls and corporate comeuppance. So what are you going to do now? She asked, refilling our glasses. With $8.4 million, you could retire early if you wanted to. I'm not ready to retire, I said, but I'm ready for a change of scenery. I've been thinking about relocating, maybe to the Oregon coast. I've always loved it there. Oregon, that's quite a move. A fresh start, I explained. Denver has too many reminders of Silverwood. Besides, with that kind of financial cushion, I can afford to be selective about my next career move. Speaking of career moves, Jenna said with a sly smile, you'll never guess what happened today. What? I was called into Laura Jenkins's office. She offered me Max Whitfield's position. I nearly choked on my champagne. She fired Max. Not officially, he resigned to pursue other opportunities. But reading between the lines, he was definitely pushed out. Apparently, the internal investigation uncovered some other financial irregularities beyond just your termination. And Greg, gone as of Monday. No pursuing other opportunities for him, just straight up fired for cause. Laura is implementing a complete overhaul of the operations department. And you're going to be the new CFO, Jenna. That's amazing. She beamed. I know it's a huge step up, and frankly, terrifying. But Laura said they need someone with integrity who isn't afraid to point out problems, even when it's uncomfortable. You're perfect for it, I said sincerely. And I'm thrilled for you. But won't it be awkward, given your role in exposing Greg and Max? Actually, Laura seemed to consider that a point in my favor. She said the company needs more people willing to stand up for what's right, even when it's risky. Jenna raised her glass. To doing the right thing and being rewarded for it. I'll drink to that, I agreed, clinking my glass against hers. Over the next month, I put my condo on the market and began house hunting on the Oregon coast. I found a charming wooden cottage on a cliff overlooking the Pacific, with a wraparound porch perfect for watching sunsets. The asking price was steep, $1.2 million, but now that was a sum I could afford without blinking. I also connected with several boutique consulting firms that specialized in contract negotiation and risk management, testing the waters for potential opportunities that would allow me to work remotely. My experience at Silverwood, particularly with the Astraline deal, made me an attractive candidate despite the gap in my employment. As I was packing up my Denver condo, preparing for the move to Oregon, I received a text from Jenna. Check the business news, now! I quickly pulled up the Wall Street Journal website on my laptop. There, in the breaking news section, was a headline that made my heart skip. Silverwood Solutions under federal investigation for contract violations and financial irregularities. The article detailed how the Department of Labor had launched an investigation into Silverwood's employment practices following multiple complaints about wrongful terminations and fraudulent documentation. The Securities and Exchange Commission was also examining potential financial reporting irregularities during Max Whitfield's tenure as CFO. I called Jenna immediately. Is this as bad as it looks? Worse, she confirmed. The investigators have been camped in our offices all week. They're reviewing every termination from the past 3 years and combing through all the financial reports. It's chaos. But you're okay, right? The settlement protects you. I'm fine, she assured me. Laura's actually been amazing through all this. She's fully cooperating with the investigation and has made it clear that the problems were with previous management, not the current leadership team. I'm glad to hear that, I said sincerely. Silverwood isn't a bad company. It just had some bad leaders. Exactly. And speaking of bad leaders, word is that Greg is being specifically investigated for pattern and practice discrimination. Apparently, you weren't the only woman he pushed out to make room for his buddies. I wasn't surprised. Greg had always surrounded himself with men who resembled him both in appearance and in mediocrity. Well, I hope they get to the bottom of it. They will, Jenna said confidently. The investigators are very thorough. By the way, when do you leave for Oregon? Next week. The movers are coming on Tuesday, and I fly out Wednesday morning. I'll miss you, she said, her voice turning wistful. It won't be the same here without you. You can visit any time, I promised. The cottage has a guest room with an ocean view. I'll hold you to that, she warned. CFO or not, I still need vacation time. A week later, I stood on the porch of my new home, listening to the crash of waves against the cliffs below. The Oregon air was crisp and salty, so different from Denver's dry mountain climate. Inside, moving boxes waited to be unpacked, but I couldn't tear myself away from the view miles of open ocean stretching to the horizon, a canvas of blues and grays shifting with the changing light. My phone buzzed with an email notification. It was from Peter Glade. Thought you might be interested in this development. Congratulations again on your victory and your new beginning. Best regards, Peter. Attached was a press release from Silverwood Solutions announcing the appointment of a new VP of Operations, a woman named Diana Chen, who had previously been overlooked for promotion under Greg Malden's leadership. I smiled at the irony. Greg had eliminated my position to protect his own power and increase his bonus. Instead, he'd lost everything: his job, his reputation, and possibly his freedom, depending on the outcome of the federal investigation. And I had gained more than I'd ever imagined possible: financial security, a beautiful new home, and the profound satisfaction of seeing justice served. As I watched the sun beginning to set over the Pacific, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink, I raised my glass of wine in a silent toast. Redundant, sure. Redundant enough to cost them $12.4 million.